let's start. Do we need DDD? This will be the topic, and let's try to answer this question together. So first of all, how many of you knows what is DDD? Please raise your hand. Okay, most of the auditory, it's good. The next question will be, what do you think? Do we need DDD? Who thinks we need DDD? Let's ask like this. Very few hands. Okay. And of those who thinks we need, or maybe who think we don't need, who uses it daily? Even less hands. Okay. That's interesting. As I mentioned in the description, this presentation will be not exactly about DDD or DDD technical aspects, but about the main idea behind which, to which we also came from different points, not through DDD, but also through other angles. But for this presentation purpose, I just took DDD. I will tell you a little bit later why. Before we jump to this, I want to start with some story. Pointer doesn't work, so I will do it like this. And the story is like this. 10 years ago, when I just decided that I will be a software engineer, it was just another exciting day at the university. I was expecting very interesting lectures about how to build calculator. And but it was object-oriented programming lecture. So we didn't talk about calculator, we talked about cats, dogs, inheritance, polymorphism, and where it could bring us if we mess all the things around. But why I remember this day till this moment, it is because it was the first time, after all this stuff about object-oriented programming, when I heard from software engineer that software engineering is not actually about writing the code and programming. It's much more about understanding how the real world is built, that it consists of objects, their properties, their behaviors, and relationships between them. And if we understand it in the right way, only then we can actually just translate it to the code, or even just write it as a code. We can translate it to any language, just in our case it is programming language. And this was a very interesting story for me, because I was always not so interested in deeply learning programming algorithms or just data structure, especially at that moment. But I was very interested in understanding how real works, how things are built, how we can describe behavior of people, of animals, of trees, whatever. And this brings us, I very successfully forgot about that day, just a week after. But it took me a very long road as a software engineer to reiterate and get back to this knowledge, maybe only after 5 or 7 years of working in different companies. I was working in one of the companies, and CTO bring me a book about domain-driven design and told me that I need to read it. And now looking back, I think that was really the moment when I kind of restarted my software engineering career, because before I was mostly interested in how to in frameworks, languages, paradigms, how to write clean code, what is test-driven design, what was very, very good. But still some important part was missing. And after reading the DDD book, I remembered that lecture that it is not about writing code, but it's about understanding how the world is built. And this is probably why I decided to call this presentation as why do we need DDD, because it was a very important moment for me when I learned about DDD for my further career. But before we will jump to actually how DDD helped me with that, 1 second. I want to discuss with you some symptoms, what we can feel and see in our daily life right now as a software engineers while we are working. And let's go. So first of the symptom that something is lacking, that we are not understanding something properly, is a rework. And don't mix this thing with prototyping or experimenting, which is good, prototyping and experimenting, but rework it actually means that we build something that nobody needs, or we build something that doesn't solve the issue the way it should be solved. As an example, what just from my recent experience in one of the previous companies, if we want to build an onboarding for the client and we agree with the business that we will gather some client data, then we will ask for a document and we kind of deploy all of this. But when we deploy, we understand that actually we need to ask for a document as a first place, because only after that we can ask for some additional properties from the client. Before that we are not allowed, and we need to rework all of this. And amount of rework depends on the approach, how we did the initial work. If we just took the task and started to write, then probably amount of rework will be much bigger. If we analyzed a little bit, then there are some options. Second symptom which we may see in our daily life is lack of the purpose. So I also personally felt like this multiple times, and I see when developers have some lacking of motivation. It usually happens because we don't there are multiple reasons for that, and there are a lot of great books about this topic, but one of the main reasons is that we actually don't understand why we are doing something and whether it will bring any value to anyone. We just doesn't believe that the thing we are doing will work. And this happened quite often. For example, just CIO come to developer and ask to please do this integration because all of our clients will be very happy about this. And you understand that probably not, they will not even use it, or it costs them money and they will not want it. And when you ask question why, you just got the answer, it will work. And this brings us to the lack of the purpose. Another thing, everyone knows and everyone was on boring meetings, probably a lot of them. The question here is why those meetings are boring. Sometimes it's really a meeting where we just need to be present, but also it happens quite often when developers just thinks that just doesn't care about knowing more or more deeper about the business. They just want to go back to their laptops and continue writing code. They want to get result of this meeting and just implement what is asked. And this definitely makes the meeting boring. And I'm not talking about the cases when you are invited because some partner told you that there will be technical details, and the only technical detail is please provide your email where we can send the API documentation. This is boring meeting, but there are plenty of meetings when business tries to invite us to discuss how business should work, and because we are not very open for conversations, we just want, please figure out and give it to me, meeting becomes boring for us. Finally, we are talking big ball of mood, messy architecture, what all of us knows pretty much very good. We see it all over the place. I hope that your company where you are working are much better at this. You don't have something like this. But usually I am also working as a consultant, and I always see something like this. And there is a very cool term, not related to big ball of mood, but from Robert C. Martin about screaming architecture, which actually is a good thing when you architect your software in a way so that it screams about what is it about, and you are, it's very easy for you to understand what is the domain of the software, what business problem it solves. And the good sign that a lot of the companies are very good at screaming architecture, but the bad sign that their architecture screams help me, not about business domain. Architecture also have a property of kind of telling us stories, because when, for example, I'm going to work with my client, I can take a look at their code, and looking through the code, I can actually sometimes like describe events when someone from management came to developer and asked, please develop this feature, we need it right now. And you see that there were no thinking about architecture or design at all. It was just implemented in place where developer was writing code at the moment, which also tells us that this is not the best way to approach a thing, development. This is a holy topic, long disputes about frameworks and technologies, which is not a bad thing by itself, and basically exactly vice versa. It's a good thing to have a healthy discussions about what's better to use, and unless the moment we discuss frameworks and technologies more than business needs. And also we very usually go to the situation when frameworks and technologies drives our design, which is not right, because design should be driven by business and customer needs, not by frameworks and technologies. And the most common one, naming struggle, when you are just sitting and you don't know how to name your variable. You wrote something and actually you are struggling to understand what you just wrote, how to name it, what will be the right name for it. This is probably the most common, and usually we are not trying to dig deep and find how it should be called in our domain or in our business. We just start to calling things like service, calculator, translator, temporary variable, whatever it is. I am definitely not doing like this. I am just talking about what I see in the code. Joking, I also had some such examples in my career. So here is a list of the symptoms. There are much more. I just took first that top up in my head, and maybe some of them, most of them I have seen during just the last couple of weeks, so it's so fresh. But the question is what we can do about it, because Actually, there are tons of solutions, books, and suggestions how to tackle all of them independently. Rework is it's one of the wastes of the lean. A lot of information you can find reading about lean, lack of purpose, books about what drives us and what brings team motivation, etc. Boring meetings, how to make meetings effective, etc., etc. Clean architecture, all of those, but if you will try to tackle all of those separately, you will read all those books, I think you will find quite a similar observation that was found by me, that they have something in common. And this thing, what is in common, is exactly about not about domain-driven design, but about business, about the ways that not only developers, but every member of the team should be interested and care about business and customers. If you have this, then actually you can solve everything, because as I mentioned in the very beginning, it will help us to understand how things needs to be working in the real world and describe some model, and so that we later can put it in a code. And when we will put it in a code, it will be much easier for us because we will have very clear understanding of what we are doing. Now let's jump very shortly to domain-driven design. Domain-driven design in 60 seconds. Basically, main takeaways, and if you will Google about domain-driven design, you will find plenty of blog posts which all says about those 4 to 5 things, like ubiquitous language, domain model and subdomains, bounded context, domain logic. So ubiquitous language is kind of most important one because it's much closer to this idea of business understanding. Because in our software we have a lot of different contexts, a lot of different point of views. We have marketing departments, we have sales departments, we have different what is called also bounded context to the domain, different point of views on our business. And in every context there are experts, and all of them using their own language. So, and the only way to kind of improve on that and be able to make conscious and easy decisions is to create kind of a ubiquitous language, because between all of those departments, at least while you're talking about your business core and clients. Domain model and subdomains is just how you approach your business modeling, how you plan your data structures, how you plan your database structures, and basically this is the first thing I'm trying to do if I go to consult any company. I'm trying to understand their business, their clients, and how I'm trying to kind of describe the ideal model of what objects are participating, how they are communicating between each other, what properties, what important properties do they have, and how they notify each other about changes. And it doesn't take a lot of time. It usually takes a couple of hours of work. It may take much more if you are in a known domain, but if you are in a domain which kind of similar to something, it just takes a couple of hours. And starting from that ideal picture, you can start reviewing what company already have and how to kind of help this company to get from where they are to this ideal picture, because this ideal picture actually is built to solve client and business issues in a very flexible manner. Let's just take a very, very short example because we, as software engineers, we are actually very good at reducing the complexity. But the thing is that there are different ways how we can reduce the complexity. For example, I was asked to make this presentation shorter if possible, and I have a very short version of this presentation. Do we need domain-driven design? No questions. This is a very short version of this presentation, but it doesn't meet the needs of clients, most probably, if they just don't want to go faster to the home. And it doesn't meet the needs of the business, because here we want to share knowledge, not just meet for asking and answering question. And if we are talking about payment service provider or bank, call it whatever you want, the easiest model which came to our mind, or probably to any person not related to software development, just bank has clients, accounts, and payments, which is very easy. And actually, this is a point where you can try to start writing code. You're building PSP, you need client, account, payment, you wrote it, everything fine. But all of these entities, any of these entities, is a very big domain or subdomain by itself. If we will just take a look, for example, on the client, we can kind of broaden it to a model which will contain at least 5 tables, where will be client representative. Representative may have different authentication methods. Client may be a private person, and private person will have one set of details. Client may be a legal person will have another set of details. Client may have contact information, which will be different sets of it. And from my experience, this is the kind of best way to approach any business issue, when you can spend initially half an hour or an hour by trying to understand ideal and complex picture of this domain or subdomain, and only this is the moment when you can start thinking about reducing complexity, about not over engineering things. And for example, for the beginning, I don't need all of this. I will have only one authentication method. I will not have representatives. I will work only with legal persons. It's totally fine. And maybe you will even reduce it to the same model from the beginning. But what you will have right now an advantage. Next time when you will have a change request or a new feature request, you already will know how this thing should play over your model. I also prepared a very, very short code example. It's actually not much about coding and technical things, but it just may show to us. I will not talk much about payments, because next presentation will be about payments, and I hope Dmitry will tell us much more about this. But I just want to put an example how our code can look like if we really spend the time to understand the domain and building a ubiquitous language between business, different point of views like compliance, marketing, whatever, and us as a developer. And this allows us to write code as a story, where you can just describe everything in just English language. And such architecture can also allow us to easily extend it, make changes, and improve. For example, we need to add some compliance review. We just have a very clear place where to put it, and we still continue doing it in business language. That at that point, payment should be reviewed by compliance. We also may think about how to make it visible without comment or with comment that there some event happens or may happen, to which will kind of trigger another actions or another things in our business domain. We also can go even further, because payment is also a very complex domain by itself, and it's not just from account to account and how much. There are a lot of stuff related to routing, and for example right now also for one of the clients I'm helping to build them Swift payments, and if someone knows what does it mean, you know that it's a nightmare. And actually it's a very complex domain by itself. And this is also another example when we as a developers, our first reaction when we understand, for example, that we need to implement Swift payments, we think, oh, okay, I doesn't care how Swift works, I will just put it there somehow so that it accepts and let it be. But again, it brings us to messy and dirty architecture, because we just solving kind of a business issue by the brute force. But if we will spend some time to think upfront what issues we might see in the future, then we are able to put at least some foundation so that our software is more flexible in the future. Which actually brings us to another two terms, which are from AML, compliance domain, which is actually about knowing your businesses and knowing your customers. I really like those two, but I want to look at them from a different aspect, not from compliance aspect, but as a thing what every team member working in the company, support or UX designer or developer, should actually apply to himself. Because this means that every person in the team should basically know and care about business, what you are doing and what your business is offering, about knowing your customers, what are their needs, what they want from your software, and what they might need. And at what we are very good as a developers, knowing constraints. And if we know all this, if we are interested, we care about all those three things, and we know all of this, it allows us to build those flexible, robust models, to build clean architecture, to attend meetings with care and with interest, to understand what this domain is about, so that we can model it or put it to the code in a better way, so that we are happier later. And at the end, I want just share a quote, which I don't know who is the author, because in the internet there are too many authors to this. But design for your software is inevitable. The alternative to good design is bad design. There is no way you will have no design. Which actually brings us to the point that it's up to you to decide whether you need domain-driven design, because it also pushes on us a lot of their views of how you should model your software, and it's actually more about object-oriented programming paradigm, that you can still care about business and write a lot of good things in a functional programming. It's just another representation of the world, which also works. But the core is that no matter what, you will have a design in your software. And to build a good design, you have to care about business and your customers. You need to know what are their needs and what is your business goals. That will help you to build better designs. That's it for today. Any questions?
You are describing like understanding and modeling all the domain, but it usually is really easy to do if you know the domain you are working on. For example, you have built the system or you are from a different company within the same field. What happens, for example, when a new joiner joins your team, for example, he is outside of this field from another business company, whatever. That's one of the questions, how to onboard maybe and give the transparency for the not so experienced engineers for your domain. And the second part of the question would be, too often there is still a lot of business knowledge within the developers and a lot of business knowledge within the business persons. How to merge that together? Maybe you can suggest some ceremonies on how to do that. Like that's a term of some kind of meetings.
Yes.
And, yeah.
Okay, let's start with the first part. Maybe I will try to answer from a different angle. Not sure if I understand your first part correctly, because I don't want to talk about onboarding, but there might be a case when you just start working in a new domain. You never did something like that. But there is one issue. Most of software engineers, including me, we are introverts and we don't like to communicate with people. We are trying to avoid this. But at the end of the day, what I also experienced that I got in the last couple of companies, I understood that there are plenty of people, plenty of companies, other companies who are doing actually the thing what you need to do, and who are open to share that knowledge, because we don't like to communicate, but we like to share the knowledge because it's just comfortable. We like it. It brings us joy. So if you are working, if you are newcomer to the company, you definitely can find just a colleague who will spend some time with you and answer your questions about domain. There are options that there is onboarding procedure in the company where you don't need to go and ask for it, it will be just presented for you. But if it's not there, you just need to ask someone who will be open to share it with you. And the same if you're just starting new business and you don't know how to do. For example, for me, example was about completing PCI DSS. I never did it. I know that it's not extremely complex, but there are some tricks. And it took me just 2 hours to find a person who was ready to share his experience, how they did it. And it helped me a lot with planning how I need to build my software, what models I need to build separately so that I don't have this nightmare of passing PCI DSS, but just a small part which will be mostly kind of legal work. This is about first part of the question. Second part of the question is about ceremonies. I don't think it's about ceremonies because ceremony by itself doesn't push us to make it consciously and with joy and with purpose. It's much more about thinking. This was about tons of boring meetings. That actually meetings, they should be not about boring stuff. They exactly should be between developers and businesses about filling the gaps in each other knowledge. And if every person in team care about filling these gaps, then this will be a very interesting meeting because developers will learn a lot from business and business will learn a lot from developers. This might be a leader's issue or leader's kind of responsibility to make this interest around all the stuff. But it also can come from us, from developers, from business person. I want to understand how work our system so that I don't ask dummy question next time. It's just curiosity because all of people we are interested in this. We want to know more. Did I answer your question? Any other? Yes, please.
I suggest that we, because of time
Okay.
limit, we kind of finish here. But you come with your questions. Yuri, he will be here.
Yes, I will.
And
Till the end.
does it work? Good. Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.